of your
Those are the
center.
two.
Not, would you, for example, in your program, think about this as being, here I'm moving my arm, and I'm just considering the directions or the pathways around my arm, not my body as a whole. And would you consider, for example, would you consider, for this thinking that way, that this is a central pathway if I'm just thinking about that local sense of directions for my arm? Do you understand what I'm saying? We did.
Yeah.
It's a different, so this notion of whole body versus body part, which is it's kind of one of the ways we started thinking in motif notation. It's a different way of categorizing the whole body as opposed to body parts. So these terms can be, when they're applied, whatever you use, take on a different meaning when you're talking about body part as opposed to the whole body. And you very correctly corrected me before about that. And I think it's important to keep in mind.
I would like to check what the current usage is in Robin notation. At one point, we decided when you go from one point to
Right,
a secondary point, you go the peripheral path.
right.
Understood. We extended that to the diagonal, so that when you have forward and you go to that diagonal, you do it the peripheral path.
To the back, to 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, 3 degree, yeah.
Three cardinal point directions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still
Whereas,
correct?
Yes.
Three
Whereas you
cardinal
wouldn't
directions.
if you were going from front to back.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Anne, in motif notation, do you think if I write if I write forward and then go backward, right? Would you say that this is permissible, or would I, like I would in LN, have to do this, or could
The
I
whole
do this?
point is you're not restricted
In motif notation,
as
these
long
rules
as you start
forward,
And then ended
and
there.
arrive.
backwards. So you could even do it peripherally?
Not in
I don't
No, I'm talking about in
The
motif
motif.
notation.
I don't think,
Forward, now go backward. Would that be permissible?
if it isn't stressed. If you
Okay.
don't think about file
Okay.
5, but
So-
from here.
To backward.
In structured notation, so I'm not sure that I have followed really any of this discussion, but in structured notation, it seems as though going back a little bit, and you said that when you're doing a central path, your arm would go out a little as part of that natural
Direct.
movement.
I
Path.
didn't use the word central.
No,
path.
she used direct path
Okay.
for that.
Direct.
So I'd like to come back to this question of terminology, but for the moment, though, you described a certain movement, and you said that you don't go in a perfectly straight line. You just naturally have a curve here, and then you said.
But even we don't actually say that it makes an absolutely straight line between point A and B. We just say that the free end passes as close as physically possible to go to the other side. So depending on a person's proportions, depending on their flexibility,
Right.
it will determine how close or far away it's from the body. But the emphasis is that it cuts as close as possible between the 2 points.
Whereas
Consistent.
So
Anna is saying that is not.
that is consistent in what we're saying. We're not. If you curve out, we don't care. If you curve in, we don't care. As long as the idea is that it remains as true as possible for the individual.
Okay. But I think that's what Anne was saying also, that there
Yes.
was just a natural. So you both were saying the same thing,
Yes.
but then there was like 10 minutes of discussion.
No, because Anne was saying it could be like here from point where, but then it's not so close. But then for structure notation, we want to saying it should be closer to the fixed end.
It might not be absolutely straight,
Yeah.
but it's closer. Then,
So-
if what Anne was saying is in a direct path, you might have some curvature. If you did it fast, that's what you're likely to have. Versus a straight path where your aim is
Well,
to
central
go
path.
straightly.
Yes.
Well, what Anne was saying was straight path. A
Yes.
straight path, you would go straight from in a straight line and make an extra effort to make sure that a line drawn from your starting point to your ending point would be your pathway.
I think my demonstration was a fast movement, because then you're not thinking as you go along. Don't think, oh, ought I to be more here or there. You just do. And if you do, the direct path does not do that.
Right.
From here, you find there will be a gentle curve until you open up to the other side. And I've tried this with groups of people. Take your arm up, now take it down. Have it forward, go back, etc.
In motif notation, and
Have we really digressed from the topic of the day? No,
No,
we haven't? Okay.
because
I'm just asking, so.
I think that we are
So I don't get
talking
confused.
about
We're trying to
the
clarify
term, the
terminology.
idea of peripheral, the concepts of peripheral, central, and transverse, and the words, and we're discovering, at least I am, this is very helpful, you know,
Yeah, I know.
some places where we have the same ideas, but we're using different words. Some places we have different concept, very different concepts, you know,
Yes,
so.
I understand that. I was just making sure that I was in my own head,
That we're still on
that we're
task.
still on
We're still on
time,
task.
so that my brain doesn't have to go somewhere else. But then I have another question for you. Then regardless of speed or anything else, when you're in, I don't know anything about motif or limbs analysis, but in structured notation, when you're notating choreography, it's all about the intention. So if the intention really is to go from A to B, and he doesn't want to see the hand flutter out, then the central path is absolutely 100% applicable and usable and understandable, and that each dancer will do it very slightly differently, but it's all about the intention. And so the central path, that you pass as close to the central part of that path as possible, makes perfect sense. So for us, speed is irrelevant.
The only reason for speed is you didn't have time to analyze what you're doing. You just do it.
No, but even as a
That's-
notator looking at the movement, what you're seeing is just from here to there. And you don't, your eye either isn't catching or it's irrelevant whether there's any kind of curve involved. So even the naked eye watching this is just seeing this, that you're passing as close to the central part.
And how
Of the
would that
joint.
differ from if you did that movement with a straight path?
Well, we were talking about terminology, and you're trying to differentiate between central path and straight path.
I don't think there is a difference. I think the difference was between your term direct and straight path, direct path and straight path, versus you're saying central path, which was, we're talking more straight path.
Well, central path is very specific to us. It's very,
Well-
very well defined.
If the difference is,
It's direct path
if
that
you
seems
say
to be.
straight path, you're concerned with the path of the extremity. If you talk central, you're thinking about the body, you want to come close to the body. So the emphasis is different. The movement might look more or less the same.
But I'm sorry to
I
interrupt there, but
understand.
isn't the only reason for the distinction between the path that goes close to the body and the path that goes in this straight line there, isn't the only reason for that because the straight line that we're defining is so close together that there's no reason for us to go like that, because that wouldn't be straight. But if the point that we're going to is on opposite sides, then
I think
That's-
Zach, what they're saying is, it might have exactly the same look. It might look exactly the same, but the way you write it, you may want a different focus because of the way it's communicated to the dancer. The intent is this.
Well, am I right also, you were talking about when you, in LN, you have two direction symbols, and then you make assumptions about them, what the default is, unless stated otherwise, right? So unless stated otherwise, if I have as you said, unless stated otherwise, if I go the two degrees of cardinal points, excuse my doing that, then I make the peripheral arc. And then if I want to change that and do something else, I say I go forward to side, I assume that it's going to be that, but if I want it to be,
A straight path.
then I have to do something like this, am I right? I put a straight, I put the symbol for straight path, am I correct?
Yeah.
So, going a bit farther, I thought about this before, going back to something we were talking about before, I'm switching gears to motif notation, where I would agree, and I think I asked you this, Tina, I don't know if anybody else who works with motif, and Oona. I was in agreement, I think we were in agreement with what Ann just said, that you're free to interpret when you have these two different symbols. But what if I want to specify? I write, go forward, so without anything, I'm free in motif notation to do any of these above, and as Ann said, within reason. You know, if I go like this, it would not really communicate that. But if I want to specify, couldn't I do it the same way that it's done in LN? And that is to then put a bow and say, do it this way, or do it, right?
Can I have
What
it?
did you just write?
A curved path.
Oh,
Do it this way. Does that make sense? And
Or
with
could
that,
you also use the exact performance symbol?
well, then what I'm yes, but then what I'm doing, I'm saying
Then you may as well just write the side
then I'm
and show
saying
the
I'm.
arc all the way
I
down.
think the exact performance in motif notation, what I would say is that if I use the star, I'm saying do it the way you interpret these symbols the way that they're interpreted in LN, and which is different from what you're saying. See, the rule in motif notation is it's different from an LN, and now I'm suggesting a way, without reverting to LN, to still be more specific. Would people agree with this, as you motif people, and Ann, that this would work as a way of being more specific?
Continuum of specificity from most general
Right.
to most detailed.
Right, which is what we
That
keep
there's
doing
options in
in
between.
motif notation, finding ways to be as general as possible, and then leading, as Ann is always saying.
But in this
and-
version, why not just put in a side symbol then?
Because
It's not
we're
about
not thinking about go here, go here, go here. I'm thinking go forward without this, go forward, now go backward. Now I want to say go forward and go backward, but I want you to do it on this path.
It's
I'm
the
not saying
intent.
go forward, go sideward, go backward.
But does
It's
that
intent.
imply